What's up, people? Waiting on the others. They are very slow to respond. They may have all ghosted me. DSP moment? What the hell is a DSP moment? Found your content recently. Hutch, enjoy it. Do you host your live streams anywhere? He does Twitch and YouTube. He simul streams these days. Hey, what's up, buddy?
Greetings, Josiah. How are things going?
We'll find out.
We'll find out.
Yeah,
interesting.
You're streaming on all their channels, though. Yeah, we're supposed to be simul streaming, but they're like MIA. They're nowhere to be found. They are tardy.
Yeah, sorry. I was late. I've been working into the later evenings as of late. Been very busy, but that's all right.
I wonder if we have Hutch. I haven't heard from him. He hasn't texted back. He may be. Oh, there
he just texted. Can you hear me?
I can. We can hear you. You're a little staticky.
Really?
Yeah, as soon as you joined, it just sounds like a little background static for me. I don't know if anyone else, Josiah, if you're... He doesn't look like he has his earplugs in, so I don't know if Josiah's hearing anything. But
yeah, I do. It's right here.
Oh, okay.
It sounds staticky.
It just went away.
Amazing.
Josiah, where's the Discord? We don't have a Discord. Maybe we should, but let me tell you something. When I tried streaming early on before I converted to pre-recorded content, I had a Discord channel and it was just a disaster and actually cost me a real life friendship as a consequence. So I said, fuck this. I'm not going to do Discord. I'm not going to do Reddit. Want no part of it. So, but live and learn. Maybe it needs its own channel. It needs its own Twitter. It needs its own Discord. I don't know, but God, that sounds like a lot of work. Yo, what up, Hutch?
Yo, what's up?
Living the dream, buddy. Living the dream.
Yeah, I didn't vote for him, but there was a guy who was on my ballot, and his name on the ballot, I can't remember his first name. I think it was William. It was William Hutchinson. That was the ballot name. So
nice.
Hutchinson clan, very broadly dispersed, it sounds like.
Nice. My roots go back to literal what do you call it? Nobility in Britain.
Wow.
That's what they all fucking say. Come on.
No. My mom is obsessed with genealogy, and she traced my dad's side of the family directly to the first, they called it Lord of the High Treasury, I think. And it was that was what they called the prime minister.
Yeah.
Before they changed.
Were you ever slave owners?
Yes.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
a funny story about that.
Well, hang on. We got to cancel Hutch. No, I'm kidding. Welcome back. Yeah.
Bro, dude, it's actually kind of crazy because so I went to my parents' house to visit them, and they have a whole wall of old family photos, and one of the photos is a dude, and he's sitting next to a black woman. He had an affair with one of his slaves, and I'm a direct descendant.
But are you a descendant like Thomas Jefferson or something like that?
No, no, but
both a descendant of slave owners and slaves. It sounds like.
Well, I was like, Mom, isn't this really bad? And she goes, No, I think they were in love. I was like, Oh, Mom. Oh, dear.
Oh gosh. Okay.
That's a thought.
Well,
guys, do we want to start with our maps? I'm excited to see y'all's maps.
I didn't even do that. I'm telling you, I didn't.
No, Josiah, you're gonna do a map while we sit here and talk about other people's maps. You've got to do a map, Josiah.
I'm gonna do Hutch's map. I trust Hutch.
God
what you can do is just put our cams at the bottom and pull up 270 to win and put it on the screen.
Should we send you images in Discord, Josiah?
Yeah, send me the link.
You can do that.
Send me the links.
All right, I'll send you the link. This is what you call it, presidential map. And you know what? I'm hesitant. This isn't my final prediction, okay? But this is my Senate map as well.
The confidence in these maps are not because I said it in my
Non-existent.
post, but because there's really like 15, literally like 15 to 20 plausible maps, and so
Yeah.
I have no idea.
It's only
Oh,
one
Hutch.
plausible map in
If
this
you put a-
guy's book.
If you put a gun to my head, that's the map that I would go with.
I don't see the links. Are you all dropping them in the
In,
private
in
chat?
Discord,
No, put
Live
them
and
in the,
learn.
yeah,
I'll put them in private.
Put them in the private chat here and restream. That way I can pull them up. Because when I try to access Discord, like when I try to open any window when restream is up, sometimes it glitches. There you go. Okay.
Is there a way to get rid of private chat because it shows up on my screen and I have it screen capped? So
That's
everything.
okay.
you
Well,
guys-
we'll just because we know that this time, like that's because unfortunately you missed the chance to link your shit. When you did that, it like wouldn't show the private chat, but because we know it's on your screen, we're not going to send like dick pics like we usually do.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Hmm.
just this one time, Hutch. Just this.
No,
one
you
time.
you should for sure be forced to pick a map, Josiah.
Yeah, you should.
God, I'm picking yours. I already said it.
No,
like,
no.
why are you're so mean? You're just yelling.
Josiah,
Just
look,
yell at me.
you have to get over your fear of predicting things in public. It's
just
not
not a-
healthy.
I'm not a
It's
predictor.
becoming a problem. Everyone's talking.
All right.
Hutch,
Live in
we have a
intervention.
very similar map, except we just changed out Georgia and North Carolina.
Wait,
Interesting.
Econo Boy,
What?
why'd you give me two maps?
I
One's
gave you
a
my
Senate
Senate map and the presidential.
Oh,
Oh, you did
okay.
a Senate map too. Okay.
Yeah, you guys need to do Senate maps. Fuck you. Guys.
You're giving Montana to Tester? Nice.
Listen, we'll talk about it.
So
he
here's
had a good poll
Pisco's.
today. He had a good poll today. Yeah.
I've got a feeling.
Pisco is showing 292, 246.
Can you
Can
scroll
you,
it down a little bit? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
The cameras are in the way, Josiah.
Hang on.
I don't know
Let's
if you
see.
can.
How about that?
Perfect. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, so
Alright.
I
So
can
this
give my explanation. If
This
you'd
is
like.
Pisco's map here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Projecting a Kamala victory, pretty overwhelming.
it's less than Biden. Here's my thought process.
I think
Number
he won
one,
by 306, if I remember correctly.
My prediction last time I was off by the only state I was off was by Georgia. This time I think
In 2020,
he's going to keep the blue.
you
wall.
perfectly.
Yeah,
Wait,
everything
hold on.
except
In
for Georgia.
2020, you got everything except for Georgia. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. I think that she's going to keep the blue wall, and I think people are underestimating her in Nevada. I have a belief that the numbers are going to turn around in terms of this kind of early vote mirage. I think people are reading too much into it. But I think that I don't like what I'm seeing out of Arizona, and I'm not liking what I'm seeing out of Georgia. And I think that that's it. And honestly, it's vibes. It's not a high degree of confidence, but gun to my head, this is the map I show.
Yeah, so you have Vice President Harris winning North Carolina. As somebody who lives in North Carolina, I sincerely hope that that's the case. I really do. I haven't been able to check the polls recently where we are. Are we still in the margin of error for North Carolina?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Every state is within. I think
Good.
1.5 points is the largest delta, and I think that's in Arizona.
Gotcha. Any questions about Pisco's map before we turn to Hutch's?
Yeah, Pisco, what are your thoughts on? So we got a slew of polls today. Quinnipiac was the one that stood out to me. Has Trump up 2 in a full field. There was also a map from Fox News that just dropped that has Harris up 2 points in Pennsylvania. And there was one more poll that I'm forgetting right now that I think was tied.
Yeah, there were some pretty good polls for Harris in the morning. There's some pretty good polls from Harris, or for Harris, sorry, in Michigan. I like the polling. The polling recently, I think, has been pretty good. It's showing, in my opinion, that everything is within reach. There are you'll just see weird polls on with a 5-point lead for Harris in Michigan, for example. I think that's one of the polls that came out, like a 5-point lead in Wisconsin as well.
And CNN,
And
those are CNN.
Those are CNN polls, right?
Yeah.
Where before those polls had her really down. And so I'm liking the way that she's finishing. I think that she's finishing strong in some of these places, and it shows that she's competitive, I think. And I think it's a coin flip race, guys. It's really fucking close.
I want to pull up at some point a clip here which addresses some of the anxieties that we have actually coming from, I think, a very unlikely voice about the strategy of, courting. Pisco, you just took your camera off. I don't know if you did that on purpose.
Yeah, there's I needed to prevent something or someone.
Oh God. Yo, what up, Joe? So I need to find this particular clip. Hang on just 1 second while I'm listening. But any other questions about Pisco's map before we turn to Hutch's?
Don't think
All
so.
right. So here's Hutch's. Gun to my head. This is my map, but to be clear, there are like 15 entirely plausible maps in both directions. I'm locking this one in as my final prediction. 292, 246.
The same
exact
map
same
as
Pisco.
same
Flip the
map as
North
Pisco.
Carolina.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Except
not
you-
same map. I mean, same distribution of EC votes, but like you have
Flipping
her losing North Carolina, which
Right,
breaks my
that's-
heart, Hutch. You fuck.
Right. That's well, I mean, I'm just going off of like what the aggregates are telling me right now. And of course, some of these aggregates have Trump advantage in every single state. I think like RCP, for example, it's entirely red for the swing states. But the reason why I'm more bullish on Georgia is because there was an enormous surge of voter registration especially for Black women after she entered the race. And I'm not confident that the pollsters properly weighted their value when they reached out to these voters. North Carolina, it just I guess I'm worried about any impact that the hurricane might have had. And then in Arizona, I just haven't seen a lot of I haven't really seen anybody that's super bullish on Arizona. Nevada, I follow a few people that are bullish on because their theory of the case is that younger voters are going to vote closer to the election. So even though the early vote is favoring Republicans right now.
In which state?
In Nevada.
No, okay.
Even though the early vote is slightly favoring Republicans, it's not like a huge amount. But the thought is that younger voters, millennial and younger, are going to vote closer to election day. And then as far as the blue wall, yeah, I think it's going to hold this year. Like I don't know the last time that the blue wall didn't vote with each other. I think it's been several decades, 3 or 4 decades. And the other thing to consider too, guys, and I feel like we should talk about this, is like, look at how the race is closing. This is a really pivotal time in the election. Contrary to what people think, undecided voters are real. They represent maybe 5-6% of the electorate. And which way they break is going to determine the outcome of this election. This is what occurred in 2016. The late breakers went to Trump by a margin of like 6 or 7 out of 10 or whatever. And when you look at their two campaigns right now, there's a stark contrast.
Yeah.
Kamala gave a really good speech last night. She did a similar speech today where she is definitely like hardcore catering moderates, centrists, young people, according the exact demographics that she needs to turn out. And Trump is, his theory of the case, as it was in both 2016 and 2020, is he thinks he can rely entirely on his base and turn out low propensity voters. And I'd rather be popular with high propensity voters. So that's my logic.
Yeah, so one thing I should say too, and I'm sorry, I was while you were talking, I was fine tuning the particular point in that clip we're eventually going to play, and I don't know if Hutch said this, but it's important to note, true, that the gender gap is, I think, something that Trump should worry about, because people talk about the gender gap, how Democrats are hemorrhaging male voters, and it's true, and it is a problem that we really need to address. But the gender gap is actually worse for Trump with women. Like the delta is greater, and women not only comprise a majority in this country, but they also comprise a majority of voters in this country, and they're also more reliable voters than men too. So that's a major vulnerability of the Trump campaign that they have taken absolutely no effort to really resolve. As a matter of fact, Megyn Kelly, and I did a video about this, who voted for Trump, and she's a strident Trump supporter, she just read the Trump campaign. Yeah, she read them the riot act because of the Madison Square Garden rally. She's like, you guys are just trying to drive women away. You're not even trying to court them at all. So I should also say too, to Hutch, you going back to North Carolina. I think it's fair to be skeptical about whether or not the vice president will win North Carolina. I mean, it's doable, but there was a report that, it's been misinterpreted. People are saying, oh, she's pulling all of her resources out of North Carolina. It's not true. She's focusing the ad buys in the Raleigh-Durham market. So she's kind of triaging in North Carolina, but the Harris campaign still absolutely has a presence in North Carolina. So if you read these things like, oh, they're pulling out of North Carolina, that's not true. They're just focusing on a very specific market, hoping to win the day there. So that was Hutch's. Now we have a Conaboy.
Yes, the most optimistic of the
Woo!
bunch, potentially, until we see Josiah's map, which he is working on, and we will see it, presumably.
This map is
but-
hot.
Listen, I was close to giving him Maine's second congressional district as well, but I'm not quite convinced. I'm open to being wrong in that regard. I'm open to being wrong in general. As Hutch said, at the end of the day, pretty much all these swing states are going to be decided by, between 0 and 5 points, right? They're all going to be very close elections. And so presumably the difference between being right and wrong could be like a very small amount of votes. I think that everyone's correct to say this is a toss-up election, which is somewhat true. But I think that the general trends are super strong for Kamala, okay? Josiah's kind of cutting off the bottom here, but basically I give her every single swing state as of right now. Now, listen. If I had to ask you guys, since 2020, 4 years ago, how many people from the boomer generation and older do you think have passed away? What would you say?
Since 2020?
Yes.
Oh. 5 million.
Okay. Hutch says 5 million. Pisco, Josiah.
Oh,
Since
sorry, I was
2020?
talking the whole fucking time. I said 2 million. My bad. I muted this. Yeah.
Pisco says 6 million.
No, I said 3.
3 million. The answer is 10 million.
Oh
Okay,
Exactly
my
what I said. I
God.
said 10 million. not 2,
Yeah.
You fuck.
10 million. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that it's important to realize that, only about the last exit poll that I saw was about 53% of elderly people vote for, let's say like Republicans in general. And so your net swing in terms of the electorate is a few 100,000 votes. That's one marginal thing to keep in mind. The second thing that I'm keeping in mind in this regard is that the polls are almost certainly in this election underestimating Kamala's performance. Hutch brings up black women. I would bring up women in general. I think that being popular with low propensity voters like men, and some people say Trump is relatively popular among black men. It's like, well, even if that's true, like men and black men disproportionately don't really vote relative to their women counterparts. I think that this last election was something like 51%, 52% women. I'm myself. No,
Oh, shit.
don't know how
That's
that's
me.
possible.
That's me. I hit the wrong button. I'm trying. So you mentioned about the polls underperforming or discounting the vice president, and Harry Enton had a clip about that, and I wanted to tee it up. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure the audio was working. But hang on
And
one
that-
second.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Harry Enton points this out. I've seen other people point it out, that the polls have never underestimated the same candidate 3 elections in a row. Okay. And I guess, Josiah, if you want to play the clip now.
There's
Yeah.
just kind of logical reasons that you can deduce for why that would be.
Exactly. We can't hear it, Josiah.
Josiah,
You can't hear it?
we can't hear
We
it.
cannot.
Just wait one.
Well,
God damn. No, hey, you just wait a second. Just wait. Just fucking wait.
Josiah gets mad at technology.
You're goddamn right, I do. Okay, what about now?
Because that's all
Yep.
we hear about. Oh, Donald Trump's going to outperform his polls. So I went back and checked out whether or not a party outran the polls 3 presidential election cycles in a row in the key battleground states. It's never happened. It's never happened. 0 times since 1972. So if the polls are going to underestimate Donald Trump once again, that would be historically unprecedented. Now, maybe you want to make the argument that Donald Trump himself is historically unprecedented, but what normally happens is the pollsters catch on, hey, we're underestimating, we're not taking into account some part of the electorate. They make adjustments, and I think that helps to explain why we have never seen that the same party has been underestimated 3 times in a row in presidential elections, at least over the last 52 years.
And Harry, you're seeing other evidence here that a polling miss, as we'll call it, wouldn't necessarily even benefit Trump as much this time.
Yeah, so, if we went back to 2020, right, all the polls, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, those 3 key Great Lake battleground states, they favored Trump by a wide margin, but there was this group of pollsters that actually had Trump out ahead. And indeed, Donald Trump's best polls in 2020 were 8 points better than the poll averages in those states. So there was this idea, this universe, hey, maybe the averages are really underestimating Donald Trump. This time around, the question that I had was, are there still these polls that may indicate that the averages are really underestimating Donald Trump? This time around, there's really not the evidence for it. The best polls for Trump actually only have him running about 3 points ahead of the polling average in the key Great Lake battleground states versus the 8 last time around. So last time around, there was this group of pollsters that said, hey, wait a minute, the polling average may be underestimating Donald Trump. This time around, John, they simply put, do not exist. And one little last thing, I'll note that those polls that really underestimated Donald Trump were still too good for Donald Trump, the polls that indicated that the polling average was underestimating Donald Trump. So I wouldn't be surprised if even this is indicating, hey, wait a minute, these polls that suggest that Trump will do better than the average are actually too good for Trump.
Interesting way to look at it. And of course, we talk about 2016, 2020. We have had a big election since then.
That's exactly right. So, you know, if the idea is that maybe the pollsters have, in fact, been making adjustments, you might have seen it in 2022. And what do we see in 2022 in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin? Well, it turns out that the average poll in those states actually underestimated Democrats by 4 points. It underestimated Democrats by 4 points. And I want to apply that to the electoral map, because if it turns out that the polls underestimate Donald Trump,
looks awfully familiar,
like
right.
they did in 2022, what happens? Well, Kamala Harris wins a sweep because she wins all these Great Lakes battleground states. She wins down in the Southeast, and she wins down in the Southwest, and she gets the 319 electoral votes. The bottom line is this, dear audience and Mr. Berman. I think a lot of folks are sort of counting in that Donald Trump will, in fact, be underestimated by the polls. But when I'm looking at the evidence, I think you got to hold on a second. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe it'll happen. But I think that there are folks who are underestimating the idea that maybe Kamala Harris will be underestimated by the polls at least a week.
And what's important to point out here, okay, is that virtually every election, there is a candidate who is underestimated, right? So what he said there was not that, oh, a candidate's not underestimated 2 times in a row. It's an individual party, right? And so there's an ebb and flow to these types of things. And part of that, like Harrington explained, could just be overcorrection in one direction or another. Like in 2012, you had a combination, like leading into 2016, you had a combination of Obama overperforming his polls, and you had a Trump who was just a unique candidate in 2016, which probably led to that spread and some of those state level pollings being magnified. And in 2024, we essentially have the opposite. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet that kind of informs my map as well, the enthusiasm for Democrats in 2024 is higher than it was in 2020 and in 2016. And the favorability of our candidate is relatively high as well. Like, this is a candidate that people don't generally just super omega hate. And obviously people seem to be very enthusiastic, and we're more enthusiastic than Trump supporters in 2024. And that's with higher propensity voters. So all those things combined, I just think the polls are really underestimating Kamala. Oh, and by the way, that's not to mention over the last 2 years, every single election, the Democrats have outperformed their polls. That seems to be the case.
A couple of things right off the bat. I know J.D. Vance has historically low favorability ratings for a vice presidential candidate, but I wonder, because I've read somewhere and I just have not had the time to go back and double check the math on this, but I've been hearing a lot of people say that Trump's favorability is actually higher now than it was in 2020 and 2016. So I'm curious, you talk about how Vice President Harris, her favorability ratings are relatively high. What about the Trump Vance ticket compared to the favorability of previous tickets?
Yeah, I'm not sure what his favorability looked like in 2016. I know that if I recall the curves correctly, he was relatively favorable to Hillary Clinton. And I don't know what his relative favorability looked like in 2020. My assumption would be that Biden would have had him beat in terms of relative favorability. And I know for a fact that his favorability is underwater relative to Kamala Harris. It's not that it's impossible for a less favorable, it's clear by the polling. You can tell by the polling. There's like a really large plurality of people who vote for Trump who would say, I don't like Trump, but I'm voting for him anyway, right? And that's going to be the same for both sides. But Kamala is the relatively popular candidate in this election. Obviously, Tim Walz is the relatively popular VP candidate. And you can see it's not just vibes, right? Like, the polling just seems to indicate the Democrats are more enthusiastic. The Democrats like their candidates more, and people in general like the Democratic candidates more. And I think that's meaningful, especially in an environment where the Democrats are compositionally less popular with less lower propensity voters, which is to say that Democrats are less popular with lower propensity voters, not because lower propensity voters just stopped liking Democrats, but because Democrats turned into high propensity voters over the course of Trump's governance. That just,
they've migrated cohorts. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's also interesting too that when you look at the aggregate data, and again, I saw this the other day. I've not had time to pull the tweet up, but Trump really does have a ceiling. It's amazing. Like the consistency with which he operates is always 47%. It's 47, 47, 47, 47 in the aggregate in every election cycle. So, again, I defer to an interview with David Plouffe, who is Vice President Harris's campaign manager, and it's a week old. But he's very calm. He's very experienced. And he was making the case like, listen, he's not worried about the polls because their internal polling has basically reflected what we are currently seeing in terms of the public facing polls now, which is that it was always within the margin of error, that it effectively showed a tied race for several weeks. Just the public polls are catching up. But they're banking on this idea that her ceiling is higher than his. Again, I use the not to invoke Star Wars, especially after the argument we all had last night, minus Hutch, but basically that Kamala has Anakin Skywalker potential in the sense that whatever her relative ability is now, she has the ability to surpass her peers, in this case, Trump. And it's really all about activating those people as well. And I do want to play a clip again on that score because Pod Save America interviewed Bernie Sanders of all people and asked him about the efficacy and the wisdom of Vice President Harris campaigning with Liz Cheney. And we all know that Bernie Sanders is a pretty blunt guy. I mean, he's a team player. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for how much of a team player he has become with, so-called establishment or corporate Democrats when it comes to winning elections. But he's also pretty blunt. Like if he thinks that President Biden or Vice President Harris make a mistake, he'll say so in public as diplomatically as possible. But he actually gave a really interesting answer to that question. So I do want to play that. But I guess we'll go to Econoboy's Senate map first.
Before you go there's just piggybacking off of what Econoboy said.
Yeah.
There just seem to be a lot of indicators right now, a lot of markers that are indicating that the race is going in one direction, except for the polls, which sort of lends credence to the idea that Econoboy is presenting. And also Harry, what was his name? Harry Enton. Yeah. Enton, proposed the same thing, which is that people, a lot of people expect her to maybe a little bit more overperform her polls. But when you're talking about favorability, when we're talking about voter enthusiasm, when we're talking about the surge of new registrations when she entered the race, and those are just three. I mean, there's a lot. There are a lot of other markers out there right now that are indicating like she's on her way to win this election. The other thing, too, is like people are trying to read tea leaves from early vote, but we don't know which way independents are going. I'm guessing they're swinging towards her. And we also don't know how many Republicans are going to vote for Kamala and vice versa. And I would be willing to bet really good money that more Republicans are going to vote for Kamala than Democrats will vote for Trump. I would be so comfortable betting like $10,000 on that.
So can we talk about this for just a second? Again, you guys might have to fill in the blanks here because I'm just recalling of things that I saw either on Twitter or headlines from earlier today. And it's just all a blur. But I could have swore I saw from a reputable source on Twitter, not just some random person, but it was like Jake Tapper or something like that, that that they're in select states, we are seeing unusually high GOP voter registration. Is that not true?
We're seeing higher numbers of registration in certain key swing states. Pennsylvania is one.
By Republicans.
Nevada's another one. Florida's another one. And nationally as well, where Republicans have
overtaken the majority,
overtaken Democrats in terms of party affiliation.
So what about? So I'm curious, Econoboy, Hutch. How do you factor that in? Are you concerned, given with what? And I think what Pisco is saying. I think that's what I saw. That in these key swing states, we are seeing an unusually high amount of Republican voter registration.
I don't really put much merit into that, and I don't necessarily put. I don't put a ton of merit. It's just something to think about, like the registration of Black women and things like this. I think that The big thing for me is that sort of long-term demographic transformation from, boomer and older generations to Gen X and millennial generations coming into their prime voting years. One thing that I didn't mention is that from 2016 to 2020, obviously millennials are 8 years older, right? Going from the youngest being 21 years old to the oldest being in their mid 30s to basically 8 years ahead being in their late 20s to early 40s. That's like a 10-point difference in your expected turnout rate, right? And so millennials being stickily liberal, that's going to make a big difference as well, not just boomers dying off and having that margin as well. Registrations don't make a big difference in my view. In part, it's just because you can get a lot of people. I've done voter registration before, right? I mean, you can register a ton of people to vote. There's a huge percentage of registered voters that just don't vote. And to the extent that a bunch of young men are registering to vote as Republicans or people in general, are they actually going to show up and vote? I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's a good strategy. Not that it's bad to register people to vote, but I wouldn't really expect that to be a big kingmaker. What I would expect, last thing I'll say is I saw some Marist polling, which showed that the composition of the early vote, I think these were Sun Belt states, but it seems like the Rust Belt states are actually more favorable for Democrats. In the Sun Belt states, the composition of early voters, when you poll them in terms of who they're voting for, Republicans, Democrats, Independent registers, are 55, 60%. Well, that's an exaggeration. About 55% of those people are voting for Democrats. And so those independents are hugely swinging towards Democrats in the early votes. And so I think the early vote numbers look good for Democrats, and I wouldn't put much stock in the registrations.
It also necessitates, if these crosstabs are correct, and obviously the crosstabs have been very noisy, very, very noisy, but it also indicates that there could be a large number of Republicans that are switching over to Kamala. And I've been telling my stream this, but there's a reason why Kamala's team has so blatantly been courting Never Trump Republicans specifically. They're not doing it based on a gut feeling. I'm sure those guys have their own internal data. They did their own focus group testing where they identified a vulnerability with Haley primary voters, for example, Never Trump Republicans. So the fact that they're targeting means that they saw something in their data to indicate a vulnerability there.
Well, on that subject, then, since we've gilded the lily, as President Clinton would say, let's hear from Bernie Sanders on this very subject.
I'm tired of getting ripped off by the drug companies. So those are some of the things I think we've got to be doing.
So that's one group of people we're trying to reach. Another are these moderates, some identify as Republican or independent. And Kamala Harris had done several events with Liz Cheney, other Republican surrogates, trying to make the case for them to vote for Kamala. Is it strange at all for you being on the same side as Liz Cheney?
No, as I mentioned earlier, we're in coalition politics. If we were in Europe, we'd probably be in different political parties, working in this case for a common goal of defeating an extreme right-wing candidate for president of the United States.
It's a really good answer.
I respect people like Liz Cheney. I disagree with Liz Cheney on everything. I respect Mike Pence. Mike Pence is an honest conservative who worked at the side of Donald Trump for 4 years. He's not voting for Trump. Mitt Romney, the 2012 Republican candidate for president, not voting for Donald Trump because they understand that Trump is a liar. He does not believe in democracy and in the rule of law. And I respect those Republicans who have the courage, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. So I have no problem with her working with Liz Cheney to make that case to conservative, moderate Republicans. But at the same time, it's not either or. You could say, conservative Republicans, look, we disagree on policy, but thank you. You and we respect the rule of law and American democracy. We work together on that. But speak to the working class of this country and say, you know what? I'm not a conservative Republican. I do understand you are living under enormous stress, paycheck to paycheck, and we're going to fight with you, and this is how we're going to do it. So it's not either or. You can work with Liz Cheney, but you can also speak out against the powerful special interest in this country and defend working class Americans.
It's a really good answer.
Yeah, so I was actually, quite frankly, surprised at how, I won't say enthusiastic he was, but very casual he was about not only endorsing that. I mean, he clearly thinks it's a good idea, unless he's lying. And that, going back to this longstanding anxiety that I've admittedly had about the sound strategy of courting never Trump Republicans, but not knowing if it is the right strategy, right? We talked about this. There's a difference between, a sound rationale and the right decision. If Bernie Sanders of all fucking people is like, yeah, I'm cool with it, and I think it's a good idea, I feel a lot better about it. Does anybody have anything to say on this?
No, I think that he said it. He said it well, and it's absolutely ludicrous to think that we can't find common ground with people like Mike Pence and Dick Cheney on these kind of core undergirding questions of democracy.
It's such surface level analysis to do the thing where you're like, oh, you're in the same party as Dick Cheney now. It's just you're absolutely obliterating nuance and the complexity of this like coalition environment. It's a juvenile argument. It's stupid.
Yeah. So a couple of things before we hear from people in chat, because a lot of people have a lot of thoughts. We'll go back real quick to Econoboy's Senate map. Let me just pull this up real quick. Here we go.
As Josiah pulls this up, let me just say a few things. People are going to look at this. They're going to say, look, Econoboy, you're crazy. You're way overly optimistic. Listen,
I just saw Texas. Oh my goodness. Okay.
It's a big old.
Sorry, just wait a minute, real quick.
There.
This person trolled me. Josiah, there's something on your shirt. You might want to take it off. I'm like, what the hell do I have in my shirt? I see what you're doing there. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
Thank you, Jerome in Seattle.
Yeah,
that was a good
I was like,
troll.
wait, what the fuck? Okay, all right.
Anyway, people are gonna say, look, this is I already see it. Rush for Life, Copium in the chat. Look, here's the thing. Okay. Can a man dare
it's not crazy. It's not crazy. It's not crazy at all. I'm not saying it's crazy. It's bold, but it's not crazy.
I look, this is a supportive group here. Okay. I'm talking to the masses here. I'm daring to dream. I have the courage to put out, this is a preliminary prediction. Okay. We'll see what my final prediction looks like. Here's the reason currently why I give Montana and Texas to the Democrats. Okay. Here's why. And I'll talk about Dan Osborne if I have the time, unless we want to talk about other stuff. In Montana, look, Tester's got super deep roots in the state. He has consistently been able to pull away Republican voters, even in environments where Montana overwhelmingly votes for a Republican presidential candidate. Look at 2012. Now, we might say, hey, 2012 is different. Trump is different. Montana is way more polarized. I mean, sure, I would agree with all these things. Look, I mean, in 2018, what do you call it? Manchin was able to win in West Virginia. I don't know what that would look like if he ran again in 2024. It's a much more Republican state. But my instinct, based on the polling and based on a scandal with his opponent, is that things are looking decent for Tester. The polling out of Montana is there's just like a huge amount of undecideds in Montana. A lot of times the polls are less than 50%. It's like, like 47 to 43. Like, what information does this poll really grant us? So I'm leaning towards Tester. In Texas, look, Beto nearly won in 2018. He was within 2 points of winning in 2018. That was in a midterm year, a favorable Democratic environment, true, but we've already established that this is a favorable Democratic environment. The polling looks much better for Colin Allred than it did for Beto. Beto outperformed his polling in 2018, and Democrats in general have been outperforming their polling in 2022, and I expect it to be the same in 2024. Put all these things together, okay? Immigration into Texas, boomers dying off. I would give my tilt prediction to Colin Allred winning Texas. Okay, I'm in Texas. Democrats have lost every statewide election for the last 30 years. I'm daring to hope in this case that Colin Allred's going to win this one. Okay,
it's not crazy. It's not anybody in chat that's calling this copium or whatever, dude. Fetterman was down 2 points in the aggregate to Oz on election day.
No, he wasn't. He was.
Fetterman, yes, he was, and he won by 5 points. The polls were off by 7 points.
Hutch, on that score, what's Allred's delta?
Most polls right now have him down 3 or 4. That's what I see. So he would have to really overperform. But bro, in the moderate, again, like exactly what Econoboy was saying, people were saying the same thing. Like you would have been crazy to predict Carrie Lake losing her race. She was up by 5 points in the polls. And she lost that race, barely, but she lost that race.
And one thing that as well that we have to keep in mind here, okay, is that as Hutch said, Kamala's campaign, very data-oriented strategy. There's a reason she made a visit to Texas. It's not because she thinks It's not because she thinks she's going to win Texas. There's no one in the central Kamala headquarters that has any thought of winning Texas because the polls don't reflect it. Yeah, it'll be maybe a bit closer than it was in 2020 if we're lucky. But, okay, Colin Allred's entire strategy, his whole, to a fault to some degree, his whole strategy has been to go out into these suburban areas with a ton of swing voters in Texas, with conservative voters in Texas, and get these Republican misaligned voters, these independents, to vote for him because he thinks, hey, a lot of these Democratic cities will take care of themselves. Where does Kamala host her rally? In Harris County in Texas, the largest urban county in Texas with Beyonce. This is a play for the Senate. Okay, this is a marginal seat. Ted Cruz is a deeply unpopular incumbent. And for those saying that this is cope, look, at the end of the day, everything I'm saying is true. You can paint a conjecture-based narrative about how Ted Cruz is going to win. This is my educated guess for Colin Allred winning. The polls don't really tell us who's going to win this race. And I just happen to lean towards the side of optimism, and all the other things that I've said, I do genuinely believe it. But that's my prediction as of right now. We'll see. A lot can happen over the next week of an election. But it is only 5 or 6 days away. So I might be sticking with this one.
Yeah, so let's be clear about a couple of things. I mean, again, these predictions that are being proffered are database. That doesn't mean that they're right, but it's not like, Conaboy, Hutch, or Pisco are pulling these things out of their ass. On the topic of Texas, somebody in chat said something interesting, and I'm curious. Again, I don't know if this is true because I haven't had time to look at it, but Calvin Howard says Texas is already at 60%
No
of the
way.
total 2020 vote count. Is that
Where's
true?
that from,
Conaboy?
Calvin? Yeah.
I haven't been following the vote totals in Texas. I know that Georgia is actually on pace to break their turnout record in the early voting period.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if they just continued turning, and now it's a heck of an assumption, but if Georgia continued turning out the way that they have in early voting, we would have more Georgian votes cast before Election Day even started than we did in all of 2020. And so, although I have an expectation that turnout in this race will be lower than 2020, to the extent that I think that, it's not clear that that is evenly distributed. That you might see some states that have marginally higher or significantly higher turnout relative to other states. Texas is a particularly low voter turnout state. And so you could imagine a scenario where voter turnout in Texas increases significantly, where maybe it marginally goes down across the rest of the country. And obviously, Georgia is a relatively high turnout state. So maybe they just are completing the circle there. But, this is a higher turnout environment in Texas. Low propensity voters in Texas tend to be people of color that lean Democratic. And so, I think that a higher turnout environment favors Democrats in Texas. Most likely that's the case. Could be wrong in that regard. And I just think things are pointing to an Allred victory. He is a very centrist Democrat. Like, I wouldn't be surprised for him to be a bit of a pain in the butt in a marginally, in a close split Senate, which we're going to have no matter what. But obviously a Democrat's better than Ted Cruz, for God's sakes. Okay. And as a Texan, I can tell you again, Ted Cruz is not well liked by anyone in the whole state. Everyone who votes for Ted Cruz is strategically voting for him. Nobody likes Ted Cruz.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm sorry, not to, because I don't want to lose sight of this, but while you were talking, I looked at the Austin Statesman, and they said there's this article, how many Texas voters have cast a ballot so far this year? And the Austin Statesman is, I guess, one of the major newspapers in Texas. By the end of the first week of early voting, at least 5.3 million Texans, nearly 30% of the state's registered voters, had cast their ballots, according to data from the Texas Secretary of State. As of Tuesday morning, updated figures show that 5.98 million Texans have voted, pushing turnout above 32%. In total, about 11.3 million Texans cast ballots in 2020. So
and
the
NBC tracker, as of today, right now, has it at 6.9 million people who have early voted.
And that's what chat is also saying too. So the figure that I cited was wrong. So that is staggering. If 11 million voted and you're already at 7 million in early votes, if 11 million total voted in 2020, that is staggering.
I mean, some states like Wisconsin, 80% of people are going to vote before Election Day, and Election Day is just kind of the icing on top. A lot of people do vote early in Texas. I mean, it's not totally unusual, but it is clear in some of these states. It just wouldn't be surprising to have a higher turnout. Like I said, of the big states, I think Texas has particularly low voter turnout because we we don't exactly make voting particularly convenient in this state.
You mean
with all the
Governor Greg
bullshit.
Abbott doesn't want to make voting convenient? Didn't he like
Surprising.
oversee not only voter roll purges, but I seem to recall, because I made this joke to your buddy Micah. He said, he's like, hey, should I for Halloween dress up as a ballot box? And I said, if you're anywhere near a Texas university, dress as a ballot box. Abbott's gonna black bag you and just take you and shoot you. But like, didn't they pull a bunch of ballot boxes off universities?
I am not aware of that. I know that the local county, what is it? I think it's our tax assessor and registrar has the power to organize ballot. Or I think it's maybe voter registration as the tax assessor and registrar, and I think it's like the county clerk who organizes the voting machines. And Harris County has been progressively getting a bit more militant with regards to its voting machines and the people. Like, we elected a Democrat who said, we're going to do mobile voting locations, and we're going to do university polling locations, and we're going to do a countywide voting. It used to be the case when we had a Republican county clerk where you had to vote in your own precinct, like the little precinct you live in. You had to go there to vote instead of just voting anywhere in the county. Mobile voting locations weren't a thing. University polling locations were very inconsistent. We elected a Democrat, and she just promised all these things and just didn't do them. And then she got primaried, if I'm not mistaken. And this is where we get Chris Hollins, who's now he's now actually the city controller. But anyway, that's a lot of Harris County stuff. The point is that these urban areas of Texas have really tried to do as much as they can at the local level to make voting convenient, to the point that the Texas state government has tried to make certain things that counties have done illegal, or limit them, like having one ballot drop box per county, stuff like that. But
so
anyway.
Hutch sent this in the private chat. It's nonpartisan Montana polling today, and it has Tester and Sheehy tied.
That's the best poll we've seen out of Montana in a really long time.
And
but there hasn't really been a lot of data from Montana, to be fair. It's been really sparse, and the quality of the polls have not been entirely great from the aggregators that I follow.
Assuming that this isn't, well, I was going to ask you, assuming that this isn't an outlier, Hutch, and that it's an
outlier. No, it's an outlier.
Well, I mean, like, basically what I mean is like that it's the start of a new trend, that this poll is correct and it's showing a closing of the gap. To what would you attribute that? Because I'd heard that he was at the center of multiple scandals, particularly about like a stolen valor, or like a discussion of a gunshot wound that he supposedly received and it was actually self-inflicted. I heard about some of these scandals. Do you think that that's
maybe the abortion? There's an abortion measure on the ballot, and so you'd probably assume that would turn out some Democratic voters, which is possibly a reason to be kind of bullish on Arizona in the presidency as well. Like, we might see Arizona, the abortion measure, buoy Kamala to a win there, and then we didn't even talk about North Carolina, about the governor's race, about how that could impact like, I feel like Econoboy is like, I don't think like either of these predictions are crazy. I think you're making the case for cautious hopium. It's not unbridled. It's not unbridled confidence, but I think you have perfectly reasonable.
This is all astrology, guys.
No.
Well, hang on. Wait, let's turn it over to Pisco, because Pisco hasn't talked in a minute. So Pisco, what are your thoughts on all this? You've been marinating in this.
Yeah, no, I love it because Econoboy, he, like me and Hutch, had a very boring map but he's taking, I think, a very cautiously hopium take, which is reasoned, even though it's reasoned based on astrology, in my opinion. And so he's pointed to all these things, and he's like, Glenn,
what did I say that wasn't true?
You've pointed to true facts. I just think that the conclusion is
that's how
not
the truth
necessarily
works.
doesn't necessarily follow. He's making an inference. So I hope if the polling error is as he says, where it's 3, like, let's say it's on average 3-4 points in favor of Democrats, oh God, we have a field day, because then Texas Senate seat is absolutely in play for sure, 100%. And holding on to the Senate seems possible, and Kamala winning seems like a foregone conclusion. But I'm not betting on that. I'm just looking at the polls as they are, and it could just as easily go for Trump. In my opinion, it could go for Trump. That error could continue over 3 years, just because it hasn't since 72 or whatever doesn't mean it won't. I'm scared about Sherrod Brown's race. I think that he pulls ahead significantly, but it's a dead heat in Ohio. So even if we did pick up Texas, you have to play defense everywhere.
In Ohio. I thought the last batch of polls from last week had had him ahead of Moreno. As
Slightly.
that gap closed? Yeah.
Slightly. It's just
yeah.
a really slight lead. It's not a big lead at all.
All of these places are slight. Even places where, you know, in Pennsylvania, Republicans are coming home, and so it's not a humongous lead for Bob Casey. Wisconsin, you're playing defense. Michigan, you're playing defense. Arizona, you're playing defense. Now, I feel pretty good about the Arizona race. I feel
Arizona looks good.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about.
Well, I mean, I think the frustration with this race is that the frustration is that the polls themselves don't tell us like anything useful, right? Because and the reason why I say that, well, it's not about the keys. I was going to say the reason I say that is because, you know, we know for a fact there's not going to be a lot of people voting third party. There just aren't going to be that many people. I would guess that probably you're going to have, you know, you're going to have Kamala at 51.5% of the vote, Trump at like about 47% of the vote.
You don't think RFK pulls 3 or 4 in Wisconsin and Michigan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that Jill Stein, RFK, Chase Oliver, I think these guys probably combined get about 2% of the vote, if I had to guess, which is in line with 2020. And I think that's reasonable to me, especially in the context of RFK dropping out. And you know, most people when their candidate drop out, they tend not to just like stupid. I mean, some people do, but most people don't just stupidly vote for someone who has dropped out. But anyway, that's all to say that we know for a fact that the polling is just incorrect in the sense that a 48-47 poll, it's like, okay, well, we know that that's not going to be the result, right? Someone's probably getting about 50%, 51% of the vote here. It's all a matter of how we might think internally where the undecideds are going. And even under that analysis, like it just seems like the polling that I've seen, the trend that I've seen is that the undecideds seem to be breaking for Kamala, right? That's just my thought, but
even Nate Silver, who defends polling, you know, quite viciously or enthusiastically, even he came out today and he was just like, I think they're hurting. He was, you know,
yes,
he was calling that out because it's just
Holy
kind
shit.
of bizarre to see so many perfect ties. And the other thing you have to consider is that, you know, these pollsters rely on funding during these election cycles, and they absolutely are concerned about missing Trump again this third time. So Pisco, you call it astrology. I think it's a logical deduction to point to these factors and question the current polling right now.
Well,
Hey,
to be fair,
I hope to be wrong.
Pisco also challenges the wisdom of Professor Lichtman and the keys.
Listen,
so-
maybe I could be.
The only steel man on the Republican side could be, and this might be the case. We might wake up Wednesday, 2024, and we might have to eat a bag of shit because it turns out Trump won the election and Sherrod Brown. It's, you know, it's like the Empire Order 66 happens and fucking 53 Republican senators and like, oh my goodness, what happened?
Order, you mean?
Yeah. And like maybe that's the case Wednesday morning. But at the end of the
it's
day,
possible that the Republicans could rally like the Sith Eternal on the planet Exegol.
Okay.
Look,
it wasn't an
But I was gonna say,
invitation.
it's possible that that's true, but that is relying on what I feel like evidentiarily, if that's a word, is a less plausible narrative, which is these low turnout voters on the Republican side are going to turn out, which has like just never been a thing, right? That's
And you'd
never
have
been
to
a thing.
believe,
as
and you'd
between
have to believe, you'll real quick, and then you can go. Like you'd have to believe that Donald Trump is more popular now than he was before January 6th, before
He
Dobbs,
is.
and before 32 felony convictions. You
He
might
is.
believe that. I don't believe that. I don't. And we've already seen that the Democrats can overcome an economic downturn. Like this is that midterm by historical precedent should have been a bloodbath. It should have been a 2010 level bloodbath.
Listen.
We've already seen that the Democratic Party was competent enough to run races all over the country and limit those losses greatly. And really,
I do think that
unfavorable
there's an exaggeration over how much Democrats overperformed in 2022. That's all I'll say. I do think that they overperformed a little bit relative to polling, but if you're saying polling sucks anyway, I get it. I will agree with Econoboy that as between the two astrological measures, that is the registration data being informative versus the more underlying, I would say, demographical analysis that he's providing, I like the demographic one more than the registration one. I think that's more informative, but that's just astrology in my opinion until it's borne out.
I'll say also that, you know, people have been saying, I mean, people aligned with Trump have been saying he's more popular than ever. We don't see that in the aggregate. He's still hovering at 47% favorability. So
Yeah, but during his term, he was at 44, 43.
Yeah,
40.
retrospectively, the Trump administration is
No,
viewed.
but that's not true though. His favorability right now is I just looked at the polling just to confirm this. On election day, his aggregate favorability was 42-54. His aggregate favorability right now, right? Like as of just going 538 is 43-52.
Well, there you
Right. And
go.
I mean, are we
So
going to
he's
say
more
that
popular than he's ever been.
no, but
percentage point.
Pisco, that's astrology though. Okay. We
But I'm
trust
just
these
that is a
polls.
fact. You're according to the polls, the metric you just provided, even though it's marginal, it's within whatever. I am just saying that does show that he's more popular than he was even after
It's a
January
dubious
6th.
way to frame it, though. It's a dubious way to frame it.
Okay.
I mean,
I hear
a
you.
Democratic nominee is an order of magnitude more popular than in 2016.
Agreed.
And
But
in 2020,
favorability
I
doesn't
don't.
necessarily translate to wins because I think Josiah said it
No,
perfectly when he's like, there are a lot of Trump voters who don't like Trump who are gonna sign an X on that name.
No, that's true, but obviously there's a lot of people who, like in 2016, just sat it out because they didn't think it was important because they weren't inspired by Hillary, who, because of the desperation caused by Trump, decided to vote in 2020, became sticky voters, which that seems to be a lot of those people that come out of that low propensity voter turnout population. And then there's a lot of people who are clearly, by the data, right? Because we think polls are data here, much more inspired by Kamala. And so it seems like if there's a narrative on low propensity voters coming out and voting, I think that tilts towards Kamala. And the fact that so many of those people who sat out in 2016 because of a less favorable candidate, they're gonna come out in 2024.
Can I bring up one point real quick before?
Yeah, and then you're gonna get the final word on this, and then we're gonna pivot to a different topic.
I just want to pull it out just for a second on the numbers, so to speak, and more on strategy, because something that struck me from what Econoboy just said, where I think you kind of implied, and I think I kind of agree with this, that there was a sticky voter phenomenon where the people that you pulled who were low propensity voters, they're Trump voters now, and they're going to stay Trump voters. Here's my question on strategy. Because of what has happened, are the Republicans doomed to have a Trump-like movement because they've alienated that small but significant group of Republicans who are alienated by MAGAism and who are now like sounding more liberal, and the only coalition that can come together includes the sticky voters who are not conservatives as much as they are loyal to Trump voters. You understand what I'm getting at?
That would usher in like 2 decades of liberal hegemony in this country.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, isn't it rational, therefore, after Trump, to continue MAGAism if you're never going to get, is it sticky voters on the other side too? Or do we think that a Haley type presidency could walk the line there and get the
completely Trump? It's completely irrational for the Republicans to nominate who they've been nominating these last 3 elections. But that's just the nature of the currently, the Democratic base are center left liberals. That's the Democratic base, right? Older black voters who are super disproportionately represented in Democratic primaries. They are not radical socialists who we might argue wouldn't appeal to a general audience. And because of that, they tend to elect more moderate people, especially relative to the Republicans. That's not the case with the Republican base. The Republican base is radically right-wing. Radically right-wing. That's who they nominate. Of course, every poll seems to indicate if they nominated Nikki Haley, we'd be in some serious trouble in terms of winning this election. If Nikki Haley was the candidate, at least the narrative would be much harder to sell. But
you think centrists would come home? The right-leaning centrists would come home.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the permission structure in the Republican Party is like even those who are defecting for Vice President Harris. Like I think David French and Brett Stevens, these prominent like neocons who are, they say with all the enthusiasm of a root canal voting for Vice President Harris in the past several days, they would flip in a fucking heartbeat. They would like Looney Tunes run back to the GOP if it.
Liz Cheney would be,
and I think Ron DeSantis. I think Ron DeSantis too. If Ron DeSantis were the nominee, despite I think he has a lot of proto-authoritarian impulses too. He's not too dissimilar from Trump in that respect.
He's a wet fart, man. I'm not worried about him long
term. No.
I am worried about Vance though. I actually do think he's doing a good job of currying favor with MAGA, and I actually think he's quite sharp.
I want to say one thing.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, 2 things. Number one, and I think I want Josiah's response to this one. Yeah. There's a conservative in my chat who will often pipe in. He says, again, please point out that Ronna Daniels, Mitt Romney's granddaughter, sabotaged the Republicans the last couple cycles. She's not in charge this time, and so I guess he's arguing that this time because you don't have the internal
yeah, this
sabotage.
guy's insane. So
Yeah.
listen, there's no doubt that Ronna McDaniel presided over a string of high-profile defeats for the Republicans, but the idea that she was sabotaging the effort, that's insane.
She had an impossible task. She
really did. She really did. And right now, the RNC is being co-chaired by Michael Watley, I think, and Laura Trump, and
who's out here recording music videos during a fucking election.
Yeah, that's a Cope conspiracy theory. I mean, no doubt she failed and fucked up. But.
Number two, and this is to your point just now, the JD Vance thing. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've made this entire cycle, and you guys will find out soon because and you'll find out why, is my underestimating JD Vance. I think that was a huge mistake. I was ridiculing him. It was like funny. It was for memes, but I didn't understand who he was, what he represents. You guys will see because I will put this information out. Keep an eye on my Twitter. I underestimated him, and that was a mistake. And you guys shouldn't underestimate JD Vance.
No, I think listen, he did a News Nation. He did a
what's going on with what's going on with Trump here? Look at that clip that I just posted.
All right, hang on 1 second.
This is like a full on. This is no. It's like a full on.
This is.
No, that's not just slipping. That's like a Hillary Clinton.
It's like
wait a minute, God damn it! We can share it with chat. Just hang on 1 second.
I think it's literally like raining outside. It's like
it's wet, dude. He slipped.
We're looking into this too much, Hutch. I think.
No, listen. There's nothing wrong with this. Pisco, you were saying last night about how firm how firm Trump is. Get from here, buddy.
Wait. Okay, so you're gonna say this is informative of a hypothetical boxing match? Just give you a little context.
Pisco said that Biden wouldn't beat Trump in a boxing match, but also Biden wins every single other athletic competition against Trump.
He wins a fucking decathlon against Donald Trump.
Like, oh my God, did you know Biden bikes and he fell off his bike once, and that's why he'll beat Trump in a boxing match? And now they're pointing to this video where he slips on water, and they're like, Trump, he's going to lose a boxing match with Joe Biden.
Listen,
I want to dive into the anecdotes because one thing I've observed from my dad, and it's kind of significant. Like, he's still going to vote for Trump, but it is tepid support. He's now telling me, what's up?
Of Trump, of tepid support
for Trump. No, he was a full-on MAGA enthusiast. They're persecuting him, fake news, blah blah blah. He was ride or die Trump. He's a retired cop for what it's worth. So I think January 6th probably tested his resolve a bit.
Is he going to split ticket?
No, he's going to vote for Trump. But I'm just saying, he's now gone from saying, "Oh, I love Trump," and blah blah blah. He's now going to saying, "I hate all politicians, but I just think he's less bad." So I mean, it's just one anecdote, but I'm just wondering, is this indicative of like a larger sentiment that's out there? I would speculate probably.
With the exception of my father, my family is still the ones who were still for Bore for Trump. Sorry, I had a small stroke there. Are still the same way. My father is like the lone exception. Unfortunately, he will not vote for Trump because of January 6th. But
my family, we are the poor whites, as Dave Chappelle would say, and my family is still drinking the sauce from Trump very much. No flips that I'm aware of.
Wait, you guys all have MAGA families?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Weird.
Well, it's just my dad. My mom is kind of apolitical. She sort of gets all of her information because she's in the same room when my dad's watching Fox, and so she had really annoying. She had similar concerns about Kamala. She had similar concerns about her, and you could just tell that it was just funneling straight from Sean Hannity's mouth to her mind.
Well, let's end on Pisco, and then we've got some.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I'm a first generation. I was born in the United States, but my family's immigrant. Like they came to this country before I was born from Peru, and so most of my family, none of my family is conservative really or MAGA really. So it's interesting to have because oftentimes you'll get that meme that immigrant families after one generation they become more conservative or that whatever, but basically the three white guys on this panel, you guys all have MAGA families. I just find that interesting that you guys nonetheless became so left wing after I don't know being in the same kind of situations where a lot of people are indoctrinated into MAGA.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, it's really my whole broader family that's super duper MAGA. I hit the family tree lottery in some regards where my grandma was basically a very conservative woman, but very anti-Trump, right? And she was actually anti-Romney as well because she was a union worker. She's like, oh, this Romney guy, he just cares about rich people. I mean, why am I going to vote for this guy? So she actually fell off the Republicans a little bit earlier, but she's always been an extreme voice of reason in my family. So without her, maybe I'd be wearing a Trump hat right now. You know?
God bless Boy's grandma. Okay, so
There we go.
listen, let's pivot real quick to we're talking about the presidency, but to tee this particular clip up, what do you all think is the likelihood that, let me put it to you like this. What is the probability that the Senate flips Republican compared to the House flipping Democrat? Hutch, let's start with you.
Well, it's obviously much less likely to flip the Senate. The House is looking. If we flip the Senate, there's conventional wisdom would say that we're probably going to take back the House.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is like, set aside the fact that you usually like. I think it's more likely that you would get both than not. But I mean, my understanding is based on the aggregate polling again from last week is the Senate is leaning more Republican than the House is leaning Democrat. Even though the House, does everyone agree with that? Okay, so we have a serious concern, because again, I think this is so important to emphasize, when we do our political commentary, it's not enough for Vice President Harris to become president. She really needs a trifecta. Like if we want to get anything done, we really need unified control of Congress. And Mike Johnson was kind of busted on tape, when he was meeting with Trump supporters and MAGA Republicans, talking about what the first 100 days of the Trump administration would look like. And he gives Trump has been saying for months that he's not going to go after the ACA. Well, Mike Johnson kind of shot him in the foot here.
There's a lot of talk. I mean, healthcare reform is going to be a big part of the agenda. When I say we're going to have a very aggressive first 100 days agenda, we got a lot of things on the table. But healthcare, it's the secret. It's the secret. Healthcare reform is not a secret. There's some really important ideas on the table, and we have a docs caucus, the physicians who serve in the House, and they've got a menu of options about this thick. And I think this is part of it because if you take government bureaucrats out of the healthcare equation and you have doctor-patient relationship, it's better for everybody, more efficient, more effective. That's the free market. Trump's going to be for the free market. You heard a little sample of that last night. We want to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state, okay? I mean, these agencies have been weaponized against the people, and it's crushing the free market. It's like a boot on the neck of job creators and entrepreneurs and risk takers.
I swear to God.
And so healthcare is one of the sectors, but we need this across the board, and Trump's going to go big. I mean, he's only going to have one more term, right? Can't run for re-election. And so he's going to be thinking about legacy, and we're going to fix all these things. And,
no Obamacare?
No Obamacare. Yeah, the ACA is so deeply ingrained. We need massive reform to make this work, and we got a lot of ideas on how to do that.
Between this, the Puerto Rican joke, and Elon Musk just coming out and saying that the middle class is going to have to suffer economic hardship temporarily at the start of Trump's term, I'm starting to find credence in the idea that the Republicans are trying to lose. Targeting the ACA is insane. Was this a private event? Was it not supposed to be leaked?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this was like the press wasn't there. This was a private event. But yeah.
Strikes me as a private donor event.
That's insane for him to, I mean, you should just expect that everything's going to get leaked. Like, don't say anything unless you're okay with it being on the internet. And for the Republicans to go after the ACA is just bananas. Like,
No, and it's interesting too, because again, people tend to forget they memory hold this, but not only obviously that there was that iconic moment where, John McCain saved the ACA in Congress, but also it was June 2020. It was during COVID. Trump brought the ACA, effectively brought it before the Supreme Court and asked them to strike it down.
Was arguing, yeah.
Yeah, that was in the middle of a pandemic where he was trying to strip the healthcare away from millions of Americans. And I think this year there was a record number of ACA registrations which occurred. And I think it's covering like 45 or 50 million people at this point.
We have the highest rate of coverage now than ever in our history. I think it's at 95%. 50 million people got covered because of the ACA cumulatively over the last decade.
Well, one thing that Biden did, which Trump is, I don't know if he's promised to get rid of it, but one thing that presumably Trump wouldn't be too favorable to is he increased the subsidy rate on basically market-based health insurance plans. And so the idea of the ACA was you've got poor people who are on Medicaid, and so we're going to expand Medicaid to cover a lot more poor people, sort of, your lower middle income people. But then you still got this middle gap between Medicaid and like the VA and Medicare and all these other different options. And so we're going to have this private marketplace, these exchanges that we're going to set up for those people. But historically, the plans were just way too expensive, right? They came with subsidies, but the subsidies weren't high enough to get people to actually go into the plans because they were still super duper expensive. Well, Biden actually increased that subsidy so much that just in his administration, I think it's like an extra like 10 million people have actually gotten onto the exchange.
Yeah.
And that was something that Trump
was that in
could
the
have done.
IRA or which bill was that in?
I don't know what bill it was. We spoke about it on the Three Wonks podcast. Micah was talking about this. But during one of the budgets or one of the bills that got passed, this was something that Biden did. And of course, the key thing to keep in mind here is this is something that Trump could have done and he just didn't do, right? So millions of people went without health insurance because he just wanted to. We could have done an expanded child tax credit. Oh, I'm for that now. I'm Trump, but he didn't do it when he was in office. Like, you just can't trust these guys on policy.
Yeah. So just to kind of close the topic about like the election itself, because there's some other things that we want to talk about, some things that we've all weighed in on today. But I guess I'm curious if you think the House is still the thing that's most likely to flip over the presidency too, because obviously the Senate is the most far-fetched. What's the aggregate polling look like for the House going Dem versus the presidency? Because the way I understood it to be, again, last week, the last time I had a real opportunity to deep dive into the data, it was the House was most likely to flip Dem, then the presidency, then the Senate. Is that still the order?
Yeah.
Yeah, the generic ballot. So in 2022, it was 47-46. Republicans end up winning. Right now, it's it looks like it's about 46.5 to 46 Democrats. So Democrats have a slight advantage on the generic ballot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They've had some gerrymandering wins. It's kind of a toss-up. A lot of it is candidate quality. New York is a battleground right now. There's some competitive races with a few of the representatives. Lawler seems to be pulling a little bit ahead in his race. There are a couple other races that I'm forgetting the names of the candidates, but it's hard to map accurately, like with a high degree of confidence, in my opinion. And so really it's another one of these toss-ups. There's enough here that both parties can feel good about it.
Are the toss-up races in the House in New York, like the New York House races that are toss-up, they have Republican incumbents in all of them, right?
A lot of them do, yeah. Actually.
I don't want to preemptively doom too much, though, because if she wins the presidency and we lose the Senate, like that's not ideal, but it's still way better than the alternative of
No,
Trump
I hear you. I hear you, but
Correct.
it's just it's again one of those things where it feels like, one step forward, two steps back, that sort of thing. And I will also say too, I think we've all in the past said that we think that Justices Sotomayor and Kagan should retire. I'm going to throw one other thing in here, just curious what you all think. So I didn't know this, but did you know that Joe Manchin endorsed Jim Justice, the Republican governor who's running on the Republican ticket to replace him? Did you all know he endorsed Jim Justice?
No, wait,
Yeah.
he endorsed Jim Justice?
Yes.
He
I don't
did that
keep
kind of
up with Joe
recently, right?
Manchin. I'll be honest.
So
I think
here's
I think it was after the filibuster talk, right?
Yeah. So here's my question. Are we sure? And again, I want to give the devil their due. Manchin and Sinema have been as unreliable on like certain big ticket issues when it comes to judges and when it comes to President Biden. By the way, President Biden has appointed more federal judges than Donald Trump did, which is saying something when you consider that was Mitch McConnell's raison d'etre. Now, obviously, the Supreme Court's still stacked, but Manchin and Sinema were instrumental in that, and they did toe the party line. But given where things stand now, that neither Manchin or Sinema are seeking re-election, and Manchin has had high-profile brawls with the Democratic Party. He revoked his, I think, endorsement of Vice President Harris after the filibuster conversation. He endorsed Jim Justice as his successor. What do you think is the likelihood that if Kagan and Sotomayor resigned, would the Democratic caucus in the Senate have enough votes to confirm any of her replacements? Because I wouldn't put it past them to undermine the Democrats.
My guess would be probably not, especially given the strategic nature of the resignations. They would probably say, we got to be above this. It's too partisan, or you have to nominate somebody that Republicans will vote for. Unfortunately.
What do you think, Pisco and Hutch?
I think that you wouldn't get Manchin, so it would all be on cinema. I'm not sure, and I think I really don't know.
It's hard to say as well
saying-
because
you're
Lisa
saying-
Hutch, what
Murkowski
about
could.
you? Well, hang on.
be a
You're
better
saying you're saying during the transition to do that?
Yeah,
Yeah, you
basically
wouldn't
in the
have
lame
Manchin.
duck,
Yeah.
in the
No, I
lame duck
don't-
period.
No, I don't think Manchin would go for that. I
Wait,
don't.
when I say in the transition period, let's be clear. I mean the day after the election until January 20th. You know, and that.
Yeah.
that
I think Sinema probably would go along with that, so that gets you to 50. I don't think Manchin would. I don't think there's a chance in hell he would go along with that.
Some other vulnerable senators might not either.
yeah.
And
I mean,
you wouldn't get Murkowski, and you wouldn't get Collins.
I think you might though, because I think that
What other
they.
Democrats would say no? Like who else?
I don't think any of them. The rest of them would say no. It would just be Sinema or Manchin you'd be worried about. But I think that I don't know. I think Murkowski or like Romney voted for Justice Jackson, right? And I mean, I think that the reason why he did that was just because I think a lot of these more centrist Republicans are like, who gives a shit about replacing the 3 liberals you have on the court? We already have a radical right-wing court anyway. Might as well get bipartisanship points. Lindsey Graham voted for Kagan and Sotomayor because they were replacing liberals anyway with that. And so I don't. There's a chance that something like that could happen as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. But the truth is, unfortunately, I think that Sotomayor and Kagan will not resign, and they'll be
Right.
stubborn about it. Unfortunately, so.
Well, I'm saying at this point that might be better than the alternative. Is my point. You know, I think
Well, they don't have to resign. Like you could presumably you could go to Sotomayor and Kagan, and they'd be like, "Hey, I'm open to this if you have the votes," and then just not resign if you don't have the votes. So I don't know. They don't have to resign, and then the appointment process kind of begins.
I would want to check the rules. I don't know if we've ever really begun a formal appointment process without the vacancy being there.
No, it doesn't
Or
have to
at
be
least
formal. That's
yeah.
what I'm saying. It could be informal, where you go to them and say, "Hey, if you guys
Oh,
can
sure.
get the votes."
No, 100%. You could still whip the votes in advance, or at least attempt to. But again, there's nothing locking, them in. I don't know. I just at this point, as soon as I saw that Jim Justice endorsement, I'm like, I think we've lost Manchin. I think Manchin is effectively dead weight.
Wait, I'm not seeing Manchin endorsing Jim Justice.
I am almost certain. I swear to God, I saw it somewhere. Let's see.
I think I agree. I think I did see something.
Why am I blanking on his name?
Joe Manchin, Jim Justice. I just searched that and see it.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I made that up. I don't think I did.
I don't remember seeing it, but I don't.
I feel like I would've
Regardless, Manchin would not go along with
Chat, somebody
surprised.
fact check me on that. I could have swore there again. It's all blur. I could have swore I saw that 3 days ago that he endorsed Jim Justice. I was stunned by that. I'll take a look at it. But okay, so that's the election. Then with the remaining time we have, I am curious. I'm very curious.
Cincinnati.
No, no, even more interesting to me.
Tentpole topic.
Anna
We will-
Kasparian.
Yes, I am
Okay.
curious.
Oh yeah.
So
That was a rough one.
okay, let's just watch a little bit of this.
In this election.
Am I losing my mind?
Yes.
Is she? All right, Akana boy, is she?
She's lost her way, I would say.
Pisco.
She's not in the process of losing her mind. I just want to be clear about the syntax. She says, "Am I losing my mind?" You've already lost your way, or you never had your way. So just be clear on why I think that statement is wrong.
Okay.
And feeling that this hyperbolic rhetoric is not helpful?
Yeah, well, 50-50 in my opinion. So when Debbie Dingell says he's going to start internment camps.
All right. Cenk is reasonable, so let's go to Anna.
You know why they pretended he didn't say that? Because that sounds uncomfortable. Because it's obviously bigoted.
Okay, he did say that. Donald Trump says a lot of dumb crap, okay? A lot of hateful crap, a lot of dumb crap, a lot of undemocratic crap. But let's just finish the rest of the story, right? Because he said that about the Muslim ban. He tried to implement the Muslim ban. And then what happened, Cenk? What happened after that?
We fought back,
Right.
And people went to the airports, good Americans.
No, that didn't matter at all. Okay, that
Pause.
action. I know it makes.
What? And remember, so I watched Stitch and Adam's coverage of our reaction there, and I reacted to the whole thing. And he's like, I can't believe Pisco would go on and say that Anna is denigrating the work done by Democrats. She never did that. She is. She absolutely is. In this moment, she is saying the lawyers who went down to go give assistance to people who were blindsided. I was actually out of the country when this happened, and everyone was losing their goddamn minds at the first version of the Muslim ban. And for her to be like, it didn't matter. It didn't matter that they were pushing with litigation that put restrictions on this ban, that made them narrow it until it was it was able to pass muster 5-4 on the Supreme Court in a much more reduced fashion than it had been. Yes, I find that work was good work. That work had an impact. That was fighting back. And Anna is saying that shit didn't matter. It didn't matter that he tried to do a religion-based restriction on immigration, which the Supreme Court said would almost certainly be unconstitutional. They were saying that that's not what the travel ban was. But what Anna is saying and acknowledging is that's what he was trying to do. And so you have this. Go ahead.
She's also using the strength of our institutions as a way to sort of insulate him from criticism. Yeah. And it's exactly the same exact argument that Ben Shapiro used in his debate with Sam Harris that we reviewed.
Practically verbatim, Hutch. Practically verbatim.
Well, I mean, look, I know people hate these comparisons, but it just, the reason people hate these comparisons is because they align so well, but only up to a certain point, because we don't live in the future, right? But in 1923, Hitler did the attempted coup of the government. This is the equivalent of living. Yeah. This is the equivalent of living in 1925 and saying, "Well, he tried to coup the government in 23 and nothing. Look, that got stopped. So what's the big? Yeah, I'm voting for him. He's going to bring back manufacturing.
Yeah, he tried a Muslim ban, but it didn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't make it. Her problem here, and I guess we'll get into the clip, is like the using the word fascist to describe Trump. And her argument is literally, well, he tries to do fascist things. Sure. I'll give you that. I'll give you, he tries to do those things, but they don't actually happen. It's like, okay, but if you try to do fascist things, you sound like a fascist. That seems like a reasonable standard.
Yeah.
Let's feel real good about ourselves. I'm not trying to discount it, but we have a system in.
Also, while you're listening to her, I think it's because I'm doing this now in real time because I didn't do it earlier. Look at Cenk's face while she's talking.
Place. Yeah. Okay, we have a judicial system. It went through the courts. It was challenged in the courts, and it was struck down.
No,
I got you, Anna, but I'm not going to take it.
So number one, they've completely upended our judiciary with all their nominees, and which they passed through. Thankfully, Biden has reversed a little bit of it. But at the top of the Supreme Court, you have a crazy Supreme Court that just had granted him absolute immunity, and you're putting your faith that they're going to be any kind of meaningful check on Trump's use of authority. Get real. And the way you can tell as she's saying it, I don't even know if she believes what she's saying, because holy crap, his whole goal is to destroy those checks, to centralize authority. And so for you to cite the things that he's trying to destroy, you just heard Mike Johnson say, we want to destroy the administrative state. What were a lot of the checks on Trump's power? Someone in the chat said it. Sally Yates was the acting attorney general at the time. She stopped enforcement of the first version of the travel ban because she said it was unconstitutional. A lot of insiders in the administrative state did brave things and upheld their constitutional oaths. They're actively saying we are going to change that, and they have a Supreme Court who has said the executive branch is a branch unto itself, and they're fully going to accept this unitary executive theory. And so Anna is so wrong.
And let's apply her logic to a hypothetical here. So let's say somebody goes to a Trump rally and tries to shoot at him, but Trump is protected by protective glass. The logic here is, well, you should let that guy go to the second rally because glass worked the first time.
Yeah,
so there's
100%.
Not really risk there.
100%. Yes,
absurd.
Of course. And of course, it invokes the that famous Sideshow Bob Simpson's clip where he's like, "Oh, attempted murder. Did they give a Nobel Prize for attempted chemistry?" Yes, it turns out that attempting to do a bad thing is still a bad thing, even if you're not successful.
And we haven't even discussed the rhetoric that Trump uses regularly. Today at a rally, let me just read you what Trump said. He said Democrats are evil and professional thieves intent on stealing elections and destroying America. He said that if he loses, Jewish voters would have a lot to do with the result. He called Harris mentally disabled and mentally impaired, claiming she was born that way. He also called her regarded at a private dinner for donors.
And by the way, it's important to point, like she didn't wheel out this argument in front of Cenk, I don't believe. Maybe she does. I just might not remember. But on Twitter, she extended this by saying something like, well, you know, if Trump is such a fascist, why does he have record support from minority communities? Like as if these two things are
no. That's
like,
so wait a minute. That's so important. That's so important because I want you to make note of that because I responded to that. And it's relevant to something she says here. Pay very close attention. Keep it in the back of your mind. Trump has record high support among minorities. Ergo, he can't be a fascist.
A chance on a guy who says, I'd like to ban you and your family because you guys are so dirty and inferior to us. He says, arrest them and deport them.
No, I know he says that. Okay,
so is he
how
going
would
to try to do that? Of course he's going to try to do that.
How would that process work, considering the majority of these individuals are American citizens?
And we're going to skip to that part, but I do want to return to Pisco and maybe you can lay out some ways because I understand where some people have a hard time fathoming, you know, this idea that the executive can do things extra legally or extra judicially, you know, in terms of how they exercise their powers. So maybe you could give a plausible hypothetical of how an unlawful order from Trump, be it like deporting, you know, migrants or some of the other unhinged things that Trump wants to do. So just think about that for just a second. We'll skip to, again, think about the record support among minorities.
He doesn't care about Muslim lives one bit.
Donald Trump is deeply racist and he says deeply racist things, okay?
So that's the big one right there. She's in the very same screed in which she says he can't be a fascist. And then to Akana Boy's point, goes afterwards and say, I also think he can't be a fascist because he has record high support from minorities. Then how the fuck by that rationale could he be a racist? Are you serious? Now, the answer, of course, is, of course, he can still be a racist and still enjoy record support or an increasing support from minorities. And he can still be a fascist and still enjoy increasing support from minorities.
This is literally like Candace Owens, like, or I have a black friend thing. How can I be racist if I have a black? How can I be a fascist if, you know, I have, and that doesn't even follow, right? How can I be a fascist if I have black people can be fascists? I don't know what to say. Like, what is the connection between race and fascism? Now, there can be an ideology where race is a central component of a fascist dictatorship, whatever, right? Yeah, I can understand that, in group, out group, whatever. But there's nothing that says racial minorities cannot themselves be fascist, and the out group that is being sort of discriminated against in the fascist regime is some other minority group. So it doesn't even make any kind of intuitive sense.
Of course.
I want to make a distinction between Donald Trump, the person who says and does racist things, and the notion of a fascist. Because look, if we're just going to use fascist toward anyone we dislike, all right, then the word doesn't actually mean anything.
Okay, what do you want me to
do? We don't, and it does. So, you know.
I dislike you, Anna, and I don't call you a fascist.
Did you guys know that that's apparently what we meant the whole time? That's why we're calling Trump a fascist, is because we don't like him. So I mean,
look, we didn't see Democratic nominees calling Trump a fascist up until this election cycle, and we certainly didn't see Democratic nominees doing that in historical election cycles against Republicans. Like major, you know, certainly you could find some crazy radical leftists are going to say, you know, the Democrats are fascist because they're capitalist or whatever, but like it just generally isn't the case that you find a lot of mainstream Democrats saying every single Republican's a fascist. But it is the case that you find a lot of mainstream Republicans saying Democrats want to implement Marxism because we want an expansive welfare state, right? I mean, these aren't very fair descriptors, but it seems like the Republicans are more guilty of them.
His own generals called him a fascist. These are people that are not like these are people that have studied.
They just do that to everyone, Hutch.
Because they don't like him, Hutch.
These people are academics. So they studied fascist governments throughout history.
In liberal institutions, Hutch. They got corrupted by the woke mind virus.
Generals, for Christ's sakes. I feel like that gives us complete permission to run with fascism if Millie
me
and
say, Anna,
Mattis and Kelly are saying it.
Yeah.
Give me a fucking break.
People who got fired.
Want me to say wannabe dictator?
Sure, you can say want to be dictator, but I don't even think he wants to be a dictator.
Of course he does. That's what you do when you lose an election and you go, oh, I got fake electors and I'd like to terminate the Constitution and bring out the tanks and use martial law against American citizens and shoot protesters.
Yeah, but not in a
Oh my
dictator
God.
way, Jenk.
By the way, Josiah's not playing for the most part Jenk's arguments against Anna. Jenk cooked in this clip. Like, he did a really good job countering Anna's bullshit here. And again, this is someone who I've followed for a long time, that I've respected for a long time. I mean, I wouldn't say I disrespect Anna or anything like that, but it's just, she's making really bad arguments here. These are not good arguments. They're not reasonable. They're not well thought out. It doesn't seem like they're not.
It makes me think that she doesn't. It makes me think that she doesn't know what fascism means. Like, it makes me think that she literally just doesn't know what the word means.
She
literally
very
doesn't
much
know.
she very much
Twitter.
demonstrated that when she tried to define fascism in her tweet, and it just didn't make sense, right?
Wait, hold
And
on. What tweet? Pull that tweet up. I haven't seen this.
Yeah, so she basically copied and pasted something that a Twitter user replied with, and then she kind of co-opted. I'm pretty like almost word for word. Somebody who reply guide her in agreement, like, yeah, fascism means, Anna's right. You know, Trump's authoritarian. Fascism is this, and she basically just totally snatched the whole thing and put it in her own tweet.
God,
Yeah.
this is so stupid. She literally doesn't know.
Yeah.
That's a tweet right there.
Yeah, let me pull it up here real quick.
Like, why would you type this out? Like, why would you not just copy and paste from Wikipedia? Like, if you don't know what it is, why would you do this?
Yeah, let me see here.
yeah, and I mean it's important to. Oh, you have the tweet up now. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'll bite. Fascism requires a militarized citizenry, conquest imperialism, the elimination of our governing bodies like Congress, and the notion that anyone who isn't part of a master race should be massacred. Weird thing to label a guy who brags about not starting any new wars. He also passed criminal justice reform and personally pardoned black inmates who were serving life sentences for drug crimes who Obama was unwilling to pardon. But
And
I'm
then he
a stupid one.
And then he complained that the black voters didn't turn out for him in 2020. He reportedly was like, "Why did I pass that law if they didn't vote for me?"
Wait, can we just say, like, so even just analytically, let's analyze. Let's take 30 seconds. She says all of these are necessary conditions. She uses the word "and," not like it tend to be anything. She says it requires. They're necessary conditions. So that by their own logic, each one of those things is. Can you put it up again?
Yeah,
Josiah.
I don't even think conquest and imperialism are necessary. Same
No,
with
of course not.
militarized citizenry. I don't think that is necessary either.
Under this whole thing, right? So Hitler, anytime he isn't in power, is not a fascist because obviously he hasn't done those things, right? Obviously Hitler, to the extent that he's not eliminating governing bodies when he's
the Reichstag was still
the Reichstag, the other institutions. He's just like, they're just rubber stamp organizations.
Mussolini himself, Mussolini did not have this racial puritanism with his fascism, but Mussolini can't be a fascist because he didn't have a racial
element. The Nazis weren't massacring minorities really. They were like mostly just discriminating against them, and prior to their genocidal activities, like in the lead up in the 30s, they were oftentimes massacring themselves and like internal struggles in the Night of the Long Knives. And
here's the real question. Does she think a literal neo-Nazi is a fascist? Because neo-Nazis aren't in power. They don't have, there's no conquest/imperialism. They don't have a militarized citizenry. They're just white supremacists who idolize the Third Reich. Would she say, no, you're not a fascist because you're not really in a position to do anything about it? It's just so stupid.
Also, if any country has a militarized citizenry, I mean, America was one of the most well-armed citizenries. We have a robust National Guard system. Like, I just don't understand. And if all these are necessary conditions, what?
Wait, no. I'm so glad you mentioned the National Guard. Where is this? Aha, right here, buddy. Right here. Okay. Based on what people like General Milley have told us, he wanted to turn the military against American citizens during the George Floyd protests. That is 1,000% a fascist action. He also literally tried to stage a coup to overthrow the election results when he lost. This was Anna's response. Many governors did use the National Guard to respond to George Floyd protests. I guess everyone is a fascist. Thank you for your wiki expertise. Appreciate it. Did you know that? Fascism is when anytime you National Guard.
No, he was the National Guard from Trump was proposed to be used on peaceful protests. There's a difference between governors using the National Guard when there's actual rioting going on.
Right, you identify.
And then how do you leave out, like, when you're talking about fascism? Fascism is difficult to define, but there are some agreed upon characteristics, like 10 or 12 characteristics. Arguably, the most important one is having a charismatic leader that has a cult of personality. How do you not include that in your definition?
Right, that's animated by a sense of, aggrieved status, that, yearns for a more, like a halcyon time way back when, it's resistant to science. It's based on chauvinism on the country, national chauvinism. There's a racist component as well. Yeah, you look at Umberto
sometimes hyper-religious, sometimes hyper-religious, yeah.
Right, so it's so absurd. And before we go, I do want to briefly, since you guys did mention it, talk about the Adam Sitch thing, because this was funny. I did laugh. But does anyone else have anything that they want to say about whatever the fuck this is?
I think the fundamental part of fascism, which is certainly universal to all the fascist governments that I can think of. I mean, it's almost a necessary thing when it comes to fascism, whether you're talking about Franco's Spain or Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Germany, or or even Peron, or these other other examples of fascist governments across history. The one thing that unites them is a degradation and an eventual elimination of democratic, horizontal political power sharing institutions, right? Like that is like of the few uniting things of fascist governments. That is the one, right? And of course, this makes sense because Hitler wouldn't want free and fair elections, because people probably wouldn't vote for Hitler after they realized how much of an insane person he was once he actually finally got power. And this is something that characterizes Trump, right? You deny election results, you use state power to try and co-opt election results. You promise to do that if you take state power. Again, use the court system to try and get your way despite democratic results. And, at this point, he has immunity from anything that he does in office.
That in and of itself,
these are fascist.
That's something that Cenk, obviously, and I understand there's so much, happening in real time. He's watching his, dear friend and colleague have a psychotic break on stage, but yes, the context has changed. What Trump did when he was in power was prior to Trump v. United States, which is, if anything, going to exacerbate any sort of fascistic and authoritarian tendencies he has. And the whole point of the second Trump administration, should it occur, Trump is very clear about this. He's going to remove the guardrails. The people who are calling Trump fascist are, as Sam Harris said during his debate with Ben Shapiro, the guardrails themselves. General Kelly, General Milley, General Mattis, those were the guardrails, and they will be absent in the second Trump administration. And we're just kind of left to Trump's tender mercies. It's possible. I want to be clear about this because this is something I've doubled down on. It's entirely possible that a second Trump administration, that he does just kill the investigations into him and fucks off and golfs and lets whoever becomes his chief of staff, God forbid somebody like Stephen Miller, run the country. It's possible that he does that. I still think, making him president would be disastrous for two reasons, because the people he would appoint are themselves independently terrible. And also, too, it would reward Trump for all the terrible things that he did as he was leaving office. So I just want to be clear. None of us here are committed with 100% certainty that Donald Trump is going to be a full-blown aggressive fascist, even though he says he's going to be. It still doesn't justify rolling the dice and giving him the keys to the Oval Office. So now, unless anybody has anything else to say on that, I think we should turn to the Sitch and Adam thing and wrap up with that. Anybody have anything else they want to say about Anna Kasparian?
Nope. Fire it up. Let's go.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So if Donald Trump believes that is the situation and he is doing the prudent thing, he's not an authoritarian. He's delusional.
Okay, so
there's a difference.
Hitler was an authoritarian because he actually thought the Jews were coming after them, right? Yes.
I'm not going to litigate World War II or whether or not Hitler was delusional to make your point. That's like bad faith. That's bad faith.
It's not, there we go, Tom. It's not bad faith at all. You're saying that just because they believe it's happening, that it's no longer authoritarian.
And then he mutes him.
Oh, he muted him.
Yep.
What a piece of shit.
What happened?
He's making a bad faith argument. I'm not going to.
No. Wait. This is not a bad faith argument.
It is a total bad.
No.
Argument.
Hold on.
I'm not here to litigate. World War
Wait.
II.
Okay, this is what you do have to litigate, right? You're basically making the argument that delusion is a defense against everything in terms of negative intention or being labeled as an authoritarian. That is the argument that you're making.
It's not.
Well, okay, so you agree that
You
agree
that there's a difference between someone who's delusional and someone who's authoritarian, right? This person.
Now you're doing the thing that you just said you weren't doing.
This is the thing.
If they're delusional and acting on a delusion, they're not an authoritarian. They're doing the right thing. You literally agree with what he said.
No, hold on. Are you saying that someone who suffers from a delusion cannot be authoritarian? Because that's what you're saying.
No, I am not.
So give me an example of someone who is delusional and authoritarian by your definitions of these words.
They could be delusional about something else.
I don't. That's not my argument.
That is
what is happening?
That's the question is that you keep that you're saying Donald Trump is not authoritarian because he's delusional.
Someone who is an authoritarian is acting imprudently. They know that they're acting imprudently.
What?
They know that they lost the election, and they don't give a fuck. They're like, fuck the system,
that is
fuck the
Trump.
rules. It doesn't matter. I'm an authoritarian. I am the law. I am the state. That's an authoritarian. Do you agree?
So I don't agree. No. Authoritarian is just someone who doesn't have respect for the laws, the Constitution, and was willing to sacrifice all those things in favor of what they want or believe.
Okay, then we're using completely different definitions of authoritarian.
Yeah, but so again, as I asked you, under your definition, you are saying that someone cannot be delusional and authoritarian.
That's not my argument.
Someone can be delusional and authoritarian, obviously.
Okay,
obviously.
So give me an example. So what does that look like?
Saddam Hussein mistakenly executes 50 of the wrong people because he thinks they're conspiring against him because he's delusional.
Why is that authoritarian?
He knew what he was doing, though.
Because he is the law. He can do whatever he wants.
What if he thinks that they're
but so like what part of that? So the authoritarian part is the executing the people without trial? Is that the authoritarian part?
Here we go. This is it.
I'm trying to ask you. I'm trying to figure out this distinction here.
Look, I'm done with this, okay?
Okay.
I'm literally done with you.
Oh
he just sadly leaves the call.
And he left the stream.
The pod went on for another hour and he didn't come back.
What?
Yeah.
What is going
And look,
on?
the thing that's weird about that is I was going to say the thing that's weird about that is, look, there's four of us here, Sitch and Tom, I guess, as well, various college degrees and levels of, all of us are very politically involved. None of us understood what Adam was saying. We couldn't get it. Like none of us could restate what Adam was saying, and he would seemingly agree with what you're restating of it. I still don't really understand.
I can kind of understand it. What he's saying is like, would you call someone an authoritarian? So if Trump actually thinks he won the election, and the will of the people, the democratic voice is actually in his favor, right? The people, the democracy is all him, and all the institutions are corrupt. Those are the anti-democratic institutions. They're denying people their vote. They're not working.
And that would still be authoritarian. But like sometimes authoritarian is fine. Like if it's justified, then it's fine to be authoritarian. Like if
I'm done with you.
Sure. No, but like I bring up the example of like January 6th. If Democrats had stolen the election, it would have been justified for them to do a violent insurrection. That's an authoritarian measure to remedy.
Morally, I mean, arguably morally just. Listen, I don't think. Here's the thing. All this comes down to is Adam is bending over backwards, engaging in the ultimate mental gymnastics, trying to justify Trump avoiding moral culpability for his actions. The irony is he says he's Trump curious. Depending on the day, he's pro-Trump. He's going to vote for Trump, and then he backs away from it. Where the roads end at the same destination is if Trump is so deluded as to think he won an election he lost despite mountains of evidence to the contrary, then he is manifestly unfit to be president. You have no evidence of comparable delusion from Vice President Harris or any Democrat.
I'm trying to steelman him, and I think I agree with you guys that there are certain processes which, if you are making an end run around them, then it seems authoritarian, whether or not you have a delusional belief about the underlying thing or not. So I agree with you so far as that's concerned. And I do think that like you could take a quote unquote justified authoritarian act. But I want to call it one comment that I saw in the chat, which I think is correct. DT call home. Does Reed Hanna Arendt fascists are delusional? I do believe that one of the cornerstones of at least the Nazi incarnation of fascism is conspiracy, is delusion. It's the stab in the back theory. It's an organizing principle, at least of Nazism, which is you could say a flavor of fascism. Delusion, outright conspiracies that are completely fake and fabricated.
Can I show you this 11-second clip here real quick? This made me laugh so hard. Okay, this is 11 seconds from Donald Trump's ultimate fanboy, Sean Hannity. This was on Fox News.
Treasure. And today in Wisconsin, take a look at that. This may go down as an iconic, epic moment that we will remember.
He played the clip where Trump nearly slips and falls on his ass. That's the funniest thing. I saw this from ACYN. Hannity, take a look at that. This may go down.
It may. It actually may, Sean.
No, but the thing about Adam though, like I don't think Adam is stupid. I've seen him in certain settings where like he seems capable of like nuanced thought. It's just he backs himself into this corner, and he's so resistant to the notion that he's audience captured, and yet he buckles under the slightest amount of pressure. He really gets triggered.
He's deeply insecure. Yeah.
If you try to, I think he is too. Yeah. But if you try to interrogate his positions, he just like, he not only resists it, he'll get angry. He'll get like indignant that you're pressing him.
He did with what's his face there in
he did it with us. He did it with us when we did it with him. But it's like,
sure.
I feel like you're in the wrong line of work. Like your job is to have conversations about politics and culture. Like you should be prepared, capable, and willing to defend your positions.
That's why I just took the gloves off, and I don't mind being mean to them at this point. I'm so tired of walking on eggshells. It was two things. It was a conversation that we had with them where I tried to, I was like, okay, you've grilled us, and fair enough. Now, can we talk about your defense of Trump? No. Like
we live in America.
Yeah, exactly. Democracy, democracy is when, yeah. And then their treatment of Pisco in the last conversation.
I was being so nice.
Fuck these losers. Fuck them. I mean, I'll happily have a conversation with them just because I think it's interesting content. I like having conversations with people with whom I disagree. But they are absolutely bad faith actors.
Yeah, if they apologize
like
to
the
me,
highest
then I can be nice again. But
I don't think
honestly,
Sitch and Adam are... Sorry.
Go ahead. What do you were saying?
I was just gonna say I don't think Sitch and Adam are like equally. I think Adam is much worse. I think Sitch.
I agree.
I don't agree with Sitch, but I think Adam is in a whole other category.
I guess I'm just not very familiar with, with their show in general. Like Adam says, he does 8 hours of streaming 4 or 5 days a week or something like that.
And if you don't watch every goddamn minute, you're not entitled to have an opinion on this, Econo Boy. So if you don't watch it, check yourself.
But yeah, it does seem like he I don't know, I don't get, some people are like, they just get real triggered over stuff for some reason. Like Hutch said, it does seem odd. I don't know the context of Tom being invited on their show. I mean, I guess presumably he was brought on to specifically talk about this. And it does seem weird to bring him on and
mute him.
Be
Tom is the
mute him.
Yeah.
To mute him.
It's kind of authoritarian. It's kind of authoritarian.
That's true. No, that's true.
That's, you know what? It's interesting. It's also like I was it the phrase they use with Pisco, systemic dishonesty.
Systemically dishonest.
That's really systemically authoritarian of them to mute somebody, anti-democratically.
True.
Well, folks, this was fun. Obviously, we're all nervous to some extent or another about the election. Apparently not Pisco or Econo Boy. Apparently he is quite confident at this point. He has overcome his anxiety.
Yeah, I'm nervous. Look, I could be wrong, but I would bet money if I had some spare money. I would bet money that I don't know, 5 out of the 7 swing states that I predicted would go towards Kamala. And then the plurality of the time she gets all 7, but I might change my prediction. When's our next show, guys? Are we going to do a show before the election?
We may do a show before the election, but real talk, somebody said in chat, tell Hutch Winter Soldier sucks. What's your favorite MCU movie, Hutch?
Oof.
I thought you were gonna say Winter Soldier.
There's a lot riding on this.
Yeah, no, I think Winter Soldier is probably the best. Like my favorite experience.
What the fuck?
My favorite.
Yes.
Well, I'm just saying, like my favorite experience was probably like Infinity War Endgame. But in terms of like what is like the best film, Winter Soldier is really tough to beat.
Thank you.
In my opinion.
Thank you, Hutch. I just really appreciate that. You've done me a solid here. You have vindicated
Collusion.
my eminently reasonable take. Thank you.
It's great. The story's awesome. I love like it shifted the MCU into sort of like a spy espionage kind of a thing, and it was just like really. And Winter Soldier was just such a good villain in that, and
Robert Redford as the bad guy. What I mean, just in terms of like a cinema coup there, making the guy who in any other context would have been the protagonist of a political conspiracy like the Winter Soldier, 3 Days of the Condor, and all
which of the movies was it Infinity War or Winter Soldier that was the biggest movie of all time? Which one?
It was Endgame.
No. Hold on. Stop. I'm gonna defeat my own argument by that. I thought it was Infinity War. Well, which one sold more? Was it Infinity War or Winter Soldier? Answer that question.
Which one
The
sold
Rise
more
of
tickets?
Skywalker sold more than Winter Soldier 2, but as much as I love The Rise of Skywalker, I would not put it above.
You love that
the Winter
movie? So now it's
I
not even
mean,
just it's better. You love it.
I love the feeling I get watching the Emperor zap 14,000 ships out of the sky.
Oh my god!
Using the power of the dark side.
Some may consider it unnatural.
Some may consider it unnatural. This is
he's like, oh my god, C-3PO has a red arm. That's so cool. They never done that before.
The red arm was in The Force Awakens, asshole. The movie I hate. Fuck you.
Did you guys watch Andor yet?
No,
I know. Yeah, I'm a huge Andor fan. I love it.
Jesus.
Yeah,
no. These two, they gotta watch. You gotta just commit to watching the first 3 episodes.
Okay,
just do it.
I will.
No, I mean he's too busy yelling at me for my perfectly valid opinion. That's all Pisco does.
Wait. Hutch, you know what he said? He said, "The Winter Soldier is better than There Will Be Blood."
No, I wouldn't.
Yes.
I didn't say that.
Well, listen. I said that. I said that in the sense
What
that I
the
would rather
fuck?
watch The Winter Soldier than There Will Be Blood. I think There Will Be Blood until the end in the bowling alley. I think it's just one of the most boring movies.
You also think it's a better movie?
Insane. You're
insane, sir.
Wait, hold
I'm
on.
out of order.
What are your other Paul Thomas Anderson takes? Like, do you like Boogie Nights, Magnolia? Do you like Licorice Pizza? Do you like what's the other one where he's like a seamstress but a man? What's that one called? The Phantom Thread.
He said he loved.
I just know Boogie
Wasn't
Nights.
that his last one? Wasn't that his last one? 2016, I think it was.
Licorice. I can't speak. Licorice Pizza was his last one. It was really good.
What was the one that Daniel Day-Lewis did in 2016 before he retired?
That's the Phantom Thread. That's the
Yeah,
Phantom Thread.
Somehow Palpatine returned, and we're revealing it in the Fortnite spinoff. I just don't understand. Like
I don't like that.
Literally trolling.
I do not like that. I wish they pulled it out. It was an ass pull. Of course, it was an ass pull, and the development and production were rushed. Of course, I'm saying that it was a dumpster fire, but it was
when he came out in the
and it
red
had a
robe.
glow. If you mind the stench, if you could just tolerate the stench like a dumpster fire, it was warm and it had a glow.
You're a
to it.
Palpatine, Ray. No, I'm not a Palpatine.
That's not what he said.
You're a Palpatine.
He said you're misquoting. You're misquoting the brilliance. By the way, somehow Palpatine, like the finest line in all of cinema.
Quoting the brilliance.
Yeah.
We have to end on this. Let's try to get one before the election. I love you guys all. Let's
Wait, are you guys going to be in Florida on Monday?
I am. Yeah. Are you? Wait, I'm going to be in Florida. I'm flying pretty soon.
I decided to stay. Couldn't justify. I'm going to make too much money on my own to go there.
I respect that.
Deeply wish I could go. Cannot go, unfortunately.
No, but when are we going to record the penultimate? Well, I guess that's not the one right before the election.
Well, we can text about it because I don't know if I'm doing anything. Destiny wants me in Miami. Luke Beasley wants me in DC. But I'll be honest with you, as I said yesterday to Conaboy and Pisco, I'm going to be so stressed. And when I get stressed and I get in a bad mood, as much as I'm an extrovert, I want to be away from anybody. I don't even know if I'll do anything for election night. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. It's either going to be I'm either going to have to force between two people who have helped me out enormously with my career, whom I consider to be friends, or doing it remotely, or just like recording my videos and then, throwing on some sweatpants and basically like crying in the shower afterwards or something like that. I have no idea. Like it's going to be a whole thing. I don't know. It's going to be very tense.
It's gonna be tense for everybody. Mr. Bimble's in the chat. He knows how many hours I slept in that period of time when the 2020 election, and it's gonna be tense no matter what. So just get ready, get strapped in. And those of you who are watching the stream, watch either Hutch or Econoboy, what he's doing, or Josiah, or you can watch. I'm gonna be in the Miami stream, so you can see me be like quaking in fear.
It's not, I don't think it's gonna take like 5 days though. I think we'll probably know. We'll probably have a really good idea by the next day.
Hutch, they might let you. They might let you simul stream on yours.
It's too late now. I'm staying here. I'm staying here.
Wow.
That's
one less reason for me to go.
They said I could do it.
Man.
They said I could do it if I stream from my phone. I was like, I don't think so. I just, I want to go. I just can't really justify it.
Yeah, I want to go too, but the vacation just doesn't quite work out for me from work. But I will be. My plan is to stream because I think they want you to fly in on Tuesday, and I have to work on Monday, and I have to work on Tuesday as well because my vacation technically starts on Wednesday. But my plan is to stream. My plan is to stream the whole time. Okay, I don't want to stop streaming until the results get announced.
You're crazy.
Until we get to 270 at the very least. Okay, I might do rewind streaming for a few hours to sleep, but I'm going to try and stream continuously because look, I'm going to be doing it anyway. I think Pisco, you told us last night you slept 2 or 3 hours, a day or something. I mean, I'm going to be in the same boat, and I'm on vacation this time, so I can do whatever I want, and I'm just going to be following the election. Thank goodness. But,
oh my
God! All right, boys, let's go.
Much love.
Yeah,
hey,
appreciate it. We'll do this one more time before the election. So
stay cool.
Stay cool and be